Well, this should be a good one today. I'm so excited. We have a friend of the show here. We have Allison Ullmer with Ringed in Portland. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Reed. Thanks for having me. How are you?
We're good. I always was joking. We laugh, when people reach out and they say, hey, I have a friend that's a wedding vendor that would like to come on. And it's, please, we do this every week. So the more the merrier.
Well, I'll nerd out with you whenever you want me to. This is great. Thank you.
That's good. So you're in your workshop here. I can see everything behind you looking good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. My name is Allison Ullmer. My company is called Ringed. I teach couples how to make their own wedding bands in my private metalsmithing space. And I also do a lot of custom work as well. So custom wedding rings, engagement rings, and surprise pieces for loved ones.
I think that that's exciting. As someone that, when we got engaged, my wife very much wanted to, we repurposed my mom's old engagement ring because she didn't want to, wanted to kind of preserve that history. But then when it came to me as a man trying to find rings too, it was, oh, here's a box in a drawer with like 6 different options, right? Is that kind of the general experience people have?
Very much so. Very much. It's amazing how few options people have, no matter the gender, really, to express themselves and express their love. And that's really why I created this space, to really create objects that represent your individual love. And so many of us really don't prescribe to these aesthetic views that each person is supposed to have in the public right now, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And it's funny because, obviously, videographer, when we go out and do ring shots and stuff, I have my little, whatever this is, tungsten or whatever. And it's so often how many grooms we film and I go, oh, we're ring buddies. Because there's not that many options. I mean, especially, for men and women, but I just, especially at least the kind of weddings that we do, I see about the same 6 rings for grooms, like all the time.
Absolutely. Yes. And there, you want to express yourself just as much as your wife does. So it's so much fun to show everyone how you really just tell me what you like, not what you see on everyone else's finger, but tell me what you like. And I will help you make that. There's no wrong answer. There's just a lot of happiness here.
So we'll talk about how all this process works. I want to learn more about you first and kind of how you got involved in all this. So, I mean, obviously you didn't wake up yesterday, making jewelry and rings. So how did this process begin?
Well, I just realized I have now been a jeweler for over 20 years, which is crazy to me. But I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a Master's of Fine Art in metalsmithing. So I really dug deep into that world. And then I became a teacher in the academic program at the Oregon College of Art and Craft for metalsmithing. So I've taught adults. I've also taught a lot of children, and I love teaching high schoolers. And at some point, I just realized, 1, OCAC was going to close, and 2, there was another way for me to teach and really be surrounded by love all the time. And so it was about almost 5 years ago that I made the switch to Ringed, where I can still teach, I can celebrate, and I can be super nerdy in my studio.
The idea of studying metalsmithing, though, I mean, there's obviously not the most traditional of crafts to study. So what was it about that drew you in?
From a very early age, I loved to make things. Like someone showed me how to make a friendship bracelet, and I said, okay, but what if you use 20 strings and make it circular? What happens then? And when I was 15, I ended up taking the first furniture class available to high schoolers at the OCAC campus. And I was obsessed, and I knew that I would make for a living from that seminal week. But I thought no one in their right mind would major in jewelry. And so I really focused on interior architecture. And really a freak accident. I had a sports fellowship to University of Minnesota because I was a nationally competitive rower, and I cracked my kneecap, and I ended up going to U of O at the last second because I lost the scholarship. And they had a metalsmithing program, and I'd been making jewelry, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I thought, well, since I can't get into interior architecture, let me just see what's happening here. And within about 2 weeks, I finally had the cojones to go to my professor and show her all the things I've been making. And her name is Tracy Steepy. She's the head of the Rhode Island School Design program now, and I adore her. And she just said, Allison, this isn't normal. You belong here. I'm like, okay, but seriously, who in their right mind would major in jewelry? Well, after 2 years, I was obsessed. I couldn't do anything else, and I just knew I had to focus there. And that was a 5-degree program. And then I kept trying to do other things, and I'm just kind of an asshole if I'm not in the studio. I see how much it balances me, and I love the focus. I love the creativity, and it never stops.
It's so interesting, the story that gets everyone to where they are. I can't remember one of these we did. Someone was a track athlete, and it was the same kind of thing. That was kind of the path, got derailed because of injury or whatever. And then next thing you know, here we are today. And it's just interesting, the different paths that everyone goes on and winds up. That's kind of one of the impetuses of starting this podcast, Oh,
I love that. I also think it's funny. Like, I think everyone in the wedding industry is a little masochistic. The amount that we work and the amount that we focus for our clients and for ourselves. And I do think that that's very similar to very competitive athletes. Like, okay, I can't do this anymore, so I'm just going to put that focus and attention in another path. I love that.
Oh, it's like, we were talking offline, my little football podcast I do. It's like, I want to be as competitive in that as we are in the wedding industry, right? Because it's like, this is this thing that I built. I would like to think that we're, reasonably successful in what I do, keep a roof over our heads and whatever. And so I'm like, no, I also have to be like the best of this dumb podcast thing too, versus anything else. I get that. Yeah. Rowing, what was that? How hard was that to kind of have to transition away from that?
Well, it was a fast transition. I cracked my kneecap. And so even with surgery, it was still never quite the same. But that was hard. And it was also interesting because as I started rowing when I was 14, and it really was my entire identity. And I think too much so. I'm a very tall, strong woman, and I just thought most of my value was in my physical strength. And so in many ways, I'm very glad that didn't continue, because I could really see how much value I had outside of that.
That's interesting. That's very retrospective. I mean, whatever the word is, introspective, but that's, yeah, but it forced you, whether it would have happened today or, in 20 years, right, to transition into something more that, is probably more sustainable for the, your duration of, what you're going to be doing professionally, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I still dream of it. I would still like to go back in a non-competitive way. There's nothing like the high of being in a race with 7 other bodies in a boat. I still remember that, and it was absolutely phenomenal. I'd like to do that on a much more mellow level. What is that movie with Meryl Streep and Kevin Bacon, where she's in Boston and she's doing her lovely single rowing before they do the whitewater rafting? That's what I think of. I just want to be that serene person on the Willamette River at some point.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's always fascinating to me, someone that can, work and build things with their hands, right? As a videographer, I just capture kind of whatever's there, right? I have very little artistic, value to give, writing or drawing or doing anything else. So, the idea of, especially with jewelry, molding something, metal, creating something basically from scratch into a finished product. What is that like for you?
I think for some of us who know another language, I think craft ends up becoming another language for you when you've done it as long as I have. And I'm sure even with your camera, it's the same thing with filming. You just kind of understand the tools at some point. And for me, it's like old friends, but also old friends that can have some tricks up their sleeves. And it's a lifelong commitment to being a student, to be a jeweler. There's always something new to learn, and I love that. I am such a voracious student. And when it comes to rings, like even a simple one, which is what most folks are going to make in the workshop, it It really is easy. It's such a simple step-by-step process. And like I said, teaching kids literally from 8-year-olds to, I just had my oldest clients, a 72, a couple weekends ago, which was so thrilling to celebrate their second marriage together. It's really accessible, even if you've never used tools. So I use that skill and I know that skill and I'm really comfortable with it. And then I just share my excitement and my knowledge with all my clients.
And it's fascinating because it's such an old tradition, right? And the technologies and everything, it's this ancient craft, right, that we still do. And it's really weird to think of how everything's changed so much in, the millennia, right? And it's still, we're still, making rings and wearing rings and using that to be, the idea behind metalworking and kind of all that stuff. Is there, taking on such an old craft like that, right? Is it intimidating? Is there a lot of new things to pick up, or like you said, continuing to work through?
It's I wouldn't call it intimidating as much as just very rich, just a really rich history and culture. That's so awesome to be a part of. And knowing like some of the history of craft and is that a lot of this, other than like fine jewelry, which is what wedding bands and engagement rings are, a lot of this almost got lost. But in, World War II, once all the veterans came back, and they actually had the GI Bill, so that a lot of folks could get education for free. And a lot of veterans went to ceramics and metalsmithing and all of these amazing crafts that otherwise were kind of going to die out. And there are a lot of people that just needed to use their hands. And that's how it kind of continued for a while, which is kind of not exactly what you're asking, but I find it really interesting. And I mean, you can see a little part of my studio, but the 20 years of collecting tools, and I always have a new list of toys, and I always want to learn more. Yeah.
Well, it's just, it's as someone that works with cameras, right? And it's always trying to find like the newest high end, whatever, it's just pixel and all this stuff and resolution. Yeah. And then like, this is such an ancient craft, right? That I mean, more or less exists similarly in scope as it always has, right? And obviously there's refinement and things, or am I speaking wrong? Is it totally different than it used to be?
No, you're right. I mean, the big difference is technology is making quite a, how do I say this, a different path for many jewelers, in that like the CAD and CAM process allows a lot of things to be built without the hand, to literally be printed in wax, or usually it's wax or a type of plastic, and then what's called a lost wax casting process, where you build this perfect ring that might have a ton of stone settings in it. You cast that and then you finish it, which is a classic way that we make a lot of rings. But before, even 20 years ago, you had to build it all by hand, and now you don't. So at the end of the day, it allows for things to be a little bit faster. There's still a ton of skill set, but there doesn't have to be quite as much. You just have to be really good at like rhino, which is not my favorite thing. So that's the other thing, is you pick and choose. As a jeweler, you can be really good at stone setting or engraving. You could be really good at carving. Most of us choose something we love the most and really hone in on that to be, the master at it. And then sometimes we have to use contractors. Like I have an engraver that I use, and I'm super honest, like, hey, these are beautiful designs, but I'm going to give it to the absolute master rather than me try to test this out right now, which is important to have enough, to be humble enough to say when you can't do something and make sure it's still done really well for the client.
So when it came to transitioning to offering this service, right, because I've never heard of anything like this before, right? So where did this all come about?
Well, so I'd stopped teaching, and I was definitely looking for my come to Jesus moment of where do I go next? How do I move forward? How do I stay in the studio? And my really good friend, Annie Hinkes, who owns Anna Eugenia Jewelry, said, sat me down and said, Allison, I know you're trying to find your way. You really need to look at wedding ring workshops. A close friend of ours does that. And there aren't that many of us. There's just a couple of us on the West Coast. There's a couple in the Midwest and some on the East Coast. And I took a while to really think about it, and, a couple of months. And I actually remember the moment where I decided, my now husband, we'd only been dating for 4 months at the time. We had taken our first vacation together into the San Juan Islands, and we're on the ferry back to the mainland. And and it's a beautiful morning. We're facing it, and I just go, okay, I think I'm going to make this jump and really commit to this. Because this is my second business. I am a fine jeweler, Allison Ullmer Jewelry. You can look it up. I really tried to go the crazy fine jewelry route. And I just learned from that experience of how expensive it is in that world to be a business owner. And so I was worried about it. But I did all my research, and I took business classes, which in art school they should teach, and they don't. And I got a grant for even more tools so that I could be more autonomous. And I slowly made it work. And I worked what I called a part full-time job or 4 part-time jobs, just saying that I would not let rings be a point of stress until it could totally financially back me up. And my husband, as we were about to move in together, said the most romantic thing he could have possibly said. And he just said, can we be poor together for a little while? Can you just quit your horrible day job because you can't have the energy for that and this? Let's just be poor for a while. And I'm so grateful that he did that. And it's all about conviction, right? And knowing you're going to make it even when it's hard. But that's how it all started.
It's always interesting to hear kind of it was my mother telling me, years ago, like, well, I think you should go do this video thing. I'm like, well, if this fails, I can come back to you and say, hey, you told me, you gave me the go ahead at this. So it's good. It's always interesting to find the person's jumping off point. So then, talk me through what you then do offer now through the workshops and through the custom, ring making? Because now it's this long winding process. We've gotten to this point now in the conversation.
Well, so I have basically a couple really clear options. So I do make a house line, so made to order wedding rings to really show off all the work that I love to do and that, art isn't really guided by my clients. And then I have my in-person or virtual wedding ring workshops. So the main thing that I offer is the in-person workshop where you can make 1 ring or 2 rings. I have a lot of clients that love to surprise their spouse or their partner. And so that's real. I love the surprise. I love being able to make something and then hearing the big reveal. So there's that. And the way that we do that is either we get a strip of metal. There's 2 workshops. It's a fabrication workshop, which means you take a strip of metal in the studio, and I actually show them how to bend it, basically form it, and then use solder, which is like basically a metal glue that's heated, melts in, and is the same carat of gold or metal that we're using. And then we get to form it into an actual ring and then pattern it in any way we want. So that's one option, how you can make a ring. The other option is wax carving. If you want, I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
They usually say it just fine. A wax carving workshop where usually it's if you want a more organic shape, like a bulbous shape, 2 rings that you want to fit together or, have some interlocking thing or an interesting stone setting, then I show people how to literally take a piece of wax. It's a ring of wax and then carve it down to what they want. The couple I just talked about, the 72-year-old couple, they just carved the silhouette of the sisters, the mountain range, and it just looks gorgeous. And so both of them have that. And that's the kind of thing that you do with a wax carving workshop. The other thing that I offer, and this is based off of how my husband proposed to me, his name is Clement, it's Clement with a French-Canadian accent. And from the get-go, I told him, do not ever buy me jewelry. I am too picky. I know what I want. But he very much wanted to propose. And I just kept telling him, you better hurry up, sweetie, because I've almost proposed to you 3 times. We know we're going to do this, but he wanted to, so I was trying to be patient, and he wanted an object. So he went to a close metalsmithing friend of mine, and she made a 24 karat gold ring. And 24 karat gold is 100% gold. It is too soft to be worn on the regular. So the whole point was he could have an object to propose with, and then I can melt it down into whatever I want. And so now that is something that I offer, is a 24 karat gold ring that you can propose with. And then you and your partner come and we design that ring together, or, we melt that ring down and make 2 wedding rings. It's really, you define what an engagement ring or a ring means to you. But so many of us want to participate in the ring we're going to wear the rest of our lives. So I thought that was really important to have that as an offering as well.
Well, I like that because then you get this whole, well, we're going to go pick out rings for our engagement. And you're like, well, that's not fun. Because obviously it's fun, but like now, okay, this is coming, at some point in the future. So I'm imagining these when you talk and the people that are designing them, from your professional experience, do they turn out really well? I'm picturing like my at-home pottery shop or whatever. Do they look? Is this something that you would, and you can be honest here. Like, is it hit or miss, or how does it work out?
No, every single ring is gorgeous. So, gold is beautiful. Now, do I have to tell my clients some imperfections could happen, and those are just going to be part of the story? Yes, absolutely. But you can look on my Instagram, you can look on my website. All of those rings have been made by my clients. I am really proud and grateful to realize I now have worked with almost 100 couples, and all of the rings are individual and they are gorgeous. I'm so proud of all of them, but I know it's from them being patient and my guidance. Anyone can do it, but everyone asks me that. Everyone asks me, okay, but I'm really worried and I don't want to mess it up. I definitely have some anxiety when couples come in, and that's why we start with like local coffee and a local pastry, and let's just take a moment, take our breath. We're going to have a great day, and then we get into it.
Because I'm imagining, my wife has friends that like, oh, here, like shop on my Etsy, and you're like, did your daughter make this? Like, did you make this? Like, what is happening here?
There are some great self-taught jewelers, and they're, just like any art. And then there's some that I personally wouldn't buy. And that is not what's happening here. This is not a craft kit that you're going to play with and give to your daughter. This is a very intentional, guided professional experience. I am always there. I've had clients that are afraid of fire, and so I've ended up soldering for them. It's their hand that makes it, but I talk them through it the whole time. And if I see something's about to go wrong, I just intercede and it doesn't happen. Yeah.
Well, I like this idea. I like this idea of this thing that's going to be with us forever, right? It's going to be the symbol of our, love and everything. And just, I think that this is neat. Like you said, having, especially if you want to have the mock ring, whatever, to propose with, going in, doing this together. Do you find that more couples are doing this together, or that one wants to surprise the other and is doing it that way? Or you could do it like both people could do it separately, right? And then,
right. Which would be fun. For the most, I would say it's like 25% of the time I have one person, and then the rest is couples. It's because what I've been so honored by, and I wasn't really expecting when I started this business, was almost every couple has come back and said, this was one of our favorite things about getting married, because it was a day of just the two of us. We unplugged, we got to learn something, we imbued these objects with each other's love. And it's such a great story. And there wasn't a bunch of the small details that we all get a little anxious and crazy about. And I'm just so honored that I could help them with that.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine this being a highlight of any that whole engagement, wedding, whatever part of it that you want to call that. So then when they're purchasing these things, right, obviously they're purchasing your time, expertise, the materials that come with that, right? This is kind of all inclusive. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. So it's funny you said that, because in the next month, right now, everything is a la carte. And pretty soon I'm going to be just doing packages, because it gets a little confusing. But in general, the things that are still going to be added are if you want stone settings or engravings, because that's, per everyone's project. But yes, they pay for the workshop fee, which is my time, which includes a Zoom design chat and sketches from me, emails as much as we need. And then the day of, which starts always at 10 a.m. Usually it doesn't go past 4 p.m., but sometimes that's going to happen if it's an intricate piece. In December, in about a month, I have a day and a half workshop, because they have such an intricate design. And sometimes I work on rings before people get there, and that can be part of it. But this, they really want to do on their own. So we're doing a day and a half workshop, and it's a ton of fun. But usually, I think what you're asking too is the cost of a workshop. It goes anywhere between about $1,800 up to probably $3,000, depending on what you're doing. It is unfortunate that the metal market has risen as much as it has. Gold now costs almost $1,900 an ounce. And I believe at the start of this year, we were closer to $1,600 an ounce. So, that's a cost of the material that's out of my hands. But I always navigate. Tell me what your budget is, and I will tell you what is possible.
Because are there other materials then besides, if you don't want to do gold?
Well, I use, there's white gold and there's palladium. I don't do sterling silver. I don't feel that sterling silver is a strong enough material to last a lifetime. So, but we can talk about different carats of gold, right? So there's 14 karat or 18 karat gold, and I'm talking in, peach, rose, yellow, or white. But with white gold, I only do 14 karat palladium white gold, which a lot of people don't know about. Typical white gold has nickel in it, because white gold is not a natural metal. You have to add something in to make it that color. Nickel, not only can you get an allergy over the lifetime of wearing it, but it yellows. So with a 14 karat palladium white gold, it stays the same color that you buy it that day, and it is hypoallergenic. But palladium is also rising. It sounds negative, but I just try to be so transparent with everyone about the cost. I don't want there to be sticker shock. And, there's a reason it's called a precious metal.
Well, but that's the same thing you're going to navigate if you're buying rings in general. Anyway, I mean, it's just the cost of it is just something. But like you said, I have to think that. I guess just to go back to it again, I think that women are offered there are many different varieties. You say there's not as many, but I just have to think, especially for the people out there, guys especially, that just to have a little bit more uniqueness and say kind of in what it looks like and what it kind of what it represents. Like you said, adding touches like the engravings and things like that. I just have to think that it makes it so much more meaningful than just, this was just what, the kind of the last option they had at the store. What kind of reactions do you get from the couples? I'm sure you have testimonials and stuff too, but afterward, after they've gone through the process, what do they say?
I love it. And it's so interesting. I definitely have clients that are like, wow, this is so much easier than I thought it was going to be. This looks so much better than I thought it was going to be. I think about this experience every single day when I wake up and see this ring. I'm just so, as I said, honored by that. And I guess I want to go back to what you said too, though, about I have a lot of clients who are gender fluid or in the LGBTQ plus community. And that is why I really want to speak to not just, female leaning individuals, because it's so interesting, because I told you how I started this business, but the more I'm here, the more I see how especially the LGBTQ plus community is looking for spaces that celebrate and are so excited to work with them. And almost every couple that's worked with me in that community has said about the negative experiences they've had at jewelry stores. And they haven't found something that matches who they are. It just means a lot to me to be able to create that experience for them. I have this amazing client, Jess and Gemma, who are about to finish a ring. And Jess said, I'm a woman, but I don't identify as a bride. And so we made this super rad signet ring that is the biggest ring I've made in the studio. Like, there's so much gold, but that's what she wanted. And there's going to be a G inscribed on it to represent Gemma, her soon-to-be wife. And I just really want to speak to that, because the jewelry is such an interesting thing. And I think you talk about it, but I just don't believe jewelry has to have a gender, or jewelry has to have a specific style. And I just wanted to make sure I talked on that, because it's a really important part of my ethos of this business.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, that's something that I guess probably not a lot of as much thought is put into the jewelry aspect of it, right? Because obviously, and especially here in Seattle, and I know Portland, very inclusive kind of vendors, right? And celebrate, all different kinds of whatever. But when it comes to, you can kind of wear what you want now, you can get married where you want. But when it comes to those rings, it really is like, these are the feminine, bride rings, and these are it's black or whatever, man rings. And there is not a lot of, well, what if I don't want that? Or what if I feel like that's something, even if I wouldn't want either of those things anyway, right? Even if it doesn't matter. So I think that especially, when it comes to those kinds of weddings, like, I think there needs to be a space, right, to offer stuff like that. And I just don't know where you would even find that if vendors like you didn't exist to kind of offer that. You get what I mean? Like, I don't know where you find that otherwise.
It's pretty much exclusively custom work.
Yeah.
And you can look on sites like Dancing with Her and Equally Wed. Dash of Pride is going to be doing more soon, I think, as well. But you really have to find them. They're not nearly as accessible as they should be.
Yeah. Well, and then, like I said, if you're going to go down that route of, finding this custom vendor to do it, you might as well just make it yourself, I mean,
that's right. Yeah. Even means even more. It's so great. I love it.
So when you're branching out and you're doing this, obviously I'm even looking at your site, featured a lot of places and things. I mean, obviously you're successful in doing this, but the reaction, to be able to offer this sort of unique, service, across, not just from the couples, but from like other vendors from the industry, right? I mean, clearly you talk with, planners and everyone else. I mean, what is kind of the reaction when they find out that you have this service?
They're really excited. And like so many others, I hear, I didn't know you could do that, which is really hard for me to hear. I'm not the best at social media, but I try to get out there. It is my weakest link. And as a mom of a 17-month-old daughter, that doesn't help right now. But it's just about making it happen. But I think it comes down to, they're really excited. They want to find clients that would fit this sort of space and be excited about it. And sometimes they find out about me a little too late. People either get rings 2 years before they get married or 6 weeks beforehand. And so that timeline can be hard. But it's something they're interested in. And I even have vendors come and I'll do a fun little lunch and show them how to make a sterling silver band to just kind of understand the process. And that's really fun for me to like nerd out and not be so professional and just be silly with them. And there's nothing like having that community around. I bolster them and they bolster me. It's great.
Yeah, I have to imagine, we work with some high-end planners in Seattle. I wouldn't say we're necessarily like high-end, but we have these planners that work with these couples that, I guess high-end isn't even the word, just that want to really have expressive kind of control over everything. I just mean not like they're hiring someone and I mean, that they want their touch on every single thing. I don't mean high-end, but I mean maybe like, not even, particular, just wanting to really, control all the aspects of their day, really have a vision for it. And I just have to imagine that couples, if they're going to go to the work to, design their own dress or get these other things done, that they want to have control over this as well, right? And have, be able to just express that. It's just, I think that we've talked with so many vendors on here, couples wanting to be able to express themselves, especially in the Pacific Northwest, express what they want, their interests, their hobbies, their friends' hobbies, everything else through their wedding, and to be able to kind of filter it into this as well. I just have to imagine there's a lot of interest in this.
Yes. I mean, we are renowned for an area that likes adventure. Right. And so that's what it is. It just happens to be an indoor adventure with tools. But it is definitely, okay, we're going to put ourselves out on a limb and have a really rad experience. That's definitely the feel. And it is the Pacific Northwest, but I've had folks travel from Hawaii and North Carolina and Alaska. And I keep using the word, but I'm just grateful for folks, how far they'll travel to come make some beautiful rings with me. It's great.
Well, it's something that you can't get, anywhere else, right? I mean, it truly is one of a kind, not only the experience and the end product, but just going through that and having, your creativity with that. It's the same thing when we interview calligraphers or whatever, and they're like, I'm working with clients all over the world because they choose to work with me, right? When they could find anyone, and especially with the internet and being able to track down, your services that way, and then make a weekend out of it and go to Portland and design. I just think that that's a really cool, this thing. I don't know. I think it's neat. We talk to a lot of different planners or a lot of different vendors. And so I think it's an interesting service and a really cool way to really have ownership over every aspect of your wedding.
Thanks, Reed. I really appreciate that.
So what do you do when you're not, helping to forge lifelong memories kind of in the, in the smolder?
Well, my clients will actually see it because my studio is in our backyard. It's very personal. We do live in Portland proper. So I do a lot of gardening, which is super fun. And like I said, I'm a mom to a 17-month-old. So my sweet girl Freya is a straight up COVID baby. So that's been an adventure. And I do hike a lot. I actually put her on my back and she's like 30 pounds now. And we hike all over the city and all over Forest Park and do more adventures. And I'm a super nerdy cook and wine aficionado. I used to sell wine and beer. So I really love to pair wine and food. I even make duck prosciutto sometimes if you want to get real nerdy with me. And I love to make a fire and really laugh with my friends and play silly games like Catan and stuff like that. Yeah.
I'm officially 1-0 in Catan. We had our friends that were very excited about it, and we came over, and it's the only game I've ever played. I beat him. I was very happy about that, and then I retired undefeated. So that is where we'll go from there.
Oh.
Is there anything else you want to make sure we touch? Is there anything else you want to make sure we touch on, or make any new aspects or anything before we let you go today?
Well, new aspects, speaking of adventures, I am going to be talking about a big surprise in mid-December. And I can kind of I'm going to do a really exclusive weekend that's a little bit more advanced, that has more local vendors involved, and is a real kind of luxury, intimate experience for the whole weekend. So that's what I can say right now. I'm really excited about it.
Well, and you keep creating these experiences. I think, if everything everyone's went through the last 18 months has, led anyone to want to do, it's more experiences, right? And it's more participating in things and doing things, right? Where maybe, you would have passed up on that dinner party or whatever, 2 years ago. And now you're like, I would do anything in the world to go to that dinner party today. So, creating, these custom, weekends and events and stuff. I think that I could definitely see that being a thing here kind of in the future as well. So
thank you. I'm excited. I'm only going to do 10 a year to start with and kind of see how things go.
That's good.
So, I'm even judging up the space, which is really fun. It's going to be a little bit more boutique-y. But don't worry, still it's going to be tool nerd central.
That's good. If people would want to learn more about you and what you do, where would you have them check out?
Yeah, check out my website at www.ringedpdx.com or on Instagram at ringedportland.
There you go. Well, Allison, I appreciate Elizabeth connecting us and getting you on. And I always, like I said, like to feature unique wedding vendor types. So I appreciate that. And we'll be in touch here in the future.
Such a pleasure, Reed. Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
If you are like Allison and you're interested in coming on the podcast, you can go to bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest. And that's a nice, easy questionnaire that we have that you can fill out. And we'll see you next time with another wedding vendor interview. Thanks so much.
Take care, everyone.